Breaking news coverage of day 10 of Israel's war against Hamas. The Israeli death toll continues to climb. Over 1,400 Israelis have been murdered by Hamas's combined onslaught, while more than 3,600 are still wounded. Palestinian sources hold that the fatalities in Gaza are now over 2,600 people. This as the Israel Defense Forces continues to strike Hamas targets in the Strip. According to Palestinian media affiliated with Hamas, the overnight airstrikes, mainly in Gaza City in the north, constituted the heaviest sorties since fighting began last week. Over 600,000 Gazans relocated to the southern part of the Strip as per the IDF's constant warnings and amid an imminent ground incursion. We're seeing live images on the screen now, and Hamas is continuing to launch rockets from the enclave onto Israeli cities, with exchanges of fire also coming from across the country's northern border as Hezbollah tests Israel's resolve. Let's cross now live to our correspondent Pierre Steckelbach, who is standing by for us in the south of Israel. Pierre, Rafah crossing between Gaza and Egypt set to reopen, but Israel doesn't seem to be on board with a potential, even temporary, humanitarian ceasefire.
That is true, Batya. We've been receiving reports that a ceasefire has been agreed upon between the U.S., Egypt, and Israel. Now we're hearing from the Prime Minister's office that that is not the case. Hamas also saying that it is unaware of an agreed-upon ceasefire. That, of course, coinciding with the expected opening of the Rafah crossing between the Gaza Strip and Egypt at 9 a.m. local time. That also does not seem to have been the case. Now, U.S. Secretary of State Antony Blinken saying that the crossing, yesterday saying that the crossing will be opening in the following hours. He didn't specify when that crossing would be opening. There have been reports that the crossing would be open from 9 a.m. this morning for 5 hours. Foreign nationals have been lining up in front of that crossing already within the last days, because that crossing is supposed to be open for the entry of humanitarian aid on the one side and the exit of foreign nationals on the other side. Now, that only accounts for really a minority of Gazan civilians, only those who also hold a foreign passport. That comes against the backdrop of the humanitarian crisis really increasing and worsening for the civilian population there. Israel is saying that more than 600,000 people have made their way from the northern part of the Gaza Strip to the southern part, following Israel's call to evacuate that area as a possible ground invasion is looming here. The UN saying that the hospitals in Gaza who really need fuel to run their generators will run out of their fuel within the next 24 hours as Israel has cut the fuel and electricity and water supplies to Gaza. They have reinstated the water supplies for the southern part of the Gaza Strip, really fostering or calling upon more people to make their way south here. Before we spoke, we saw really a row of 4 or 5 tanks making its way to the Gaza border that is right behind us as a possible ground invasion is expected. You're right, Batya. Palestinian sources saying that this night has been the most intense night since the beginning of the war when it comes to Israeli strikes on Gaza. We have been hearing continuously booms and noises from the Israeli strikes here where we're at right now, about 3 kilometers away from the border. We have not really heard a lot of noise, a lot of booms within the last hour, but that really doesn't mean that a ceasefire is in place now, Batya.
And Pierre, we are looking at live images on the screen right now of Rafah crossing in Gaza, and as you mentioned, it seems like a minority of foreign nationals because it doesn't seem overly busy. I'll remind the viewers, we're talking about 2 million people that are currently in the Gaza Strip, and so when we're looking at these live images, very few seem to be coming. But what more do we know about the potential humanitarian aid that is coming into the Strip, not the foreign residents going out of the Strip, Pierre?
Right. In terms of foreign aid, we do know that we're first and foremost talking about water, food, and medicine. We're not talking about fuel because Israel's concern is that Hamas will use that fuel to run their generators, to operate their tunnels underground. Israel's goal here is to dismantle the Hamas infrastructure, and also the goal to cut those electricity and fuel and water supplies was to really torpedo the efforts of Hamas to run their system. Of course, this is first and foremost targeting the civilian population there, more than 2 million people who have nowhere to go. Again, foreign nationals, we don't know the exact numbers of how many people in Gaza actually hold a foreign passport. That, again, they're the absolute minority. For the vast majority of the population, this humanitarian way to cross to Egypt is not an option, Batya.
Correspondent Pierre Steckelbach there in the south of Israel giving us that latest update. Thank you for that. And bringing the conversation here in studio with me is Rafael Yerushalmi, a former senior IDF intelligence officer and a security analyst, and our correspondent, Guy Azrael. Guy, Ben-Gvir is saying that relief for Gaza, any aid has to be brought to the cabinet to first review, but there's also other reactions coming out about this potential humanitarian or temporary humanitarian ceasefire.
Yes, of course, any sort of relief to Gaza while Hamas is still in control of that area is not seen with kind eyes, not in the Israeli government and certainly not in the Israeli public. I think the world needs to understand what sort of trauma the Israeli public in general has been through on that deadly Saturday, that attack in which 1,400 Israelis, including women, children, elderly, were slaughtered, some of them beaten, burned, their bodies desecrated, and also up to 200 Israelis that are currently in Hamas captivity in the Gaza Strip. Israelis are not willing to give any reliefs to Hamas until that murderous terror group is being eliminated. So yes, the Prime Minister's office was very quick to deny the reports about that humanitarian ceasefire. Ben-Gvir is requesting that any relief will be first approved in the cabinet. We're also hearing from Energy Minister Israel Katz, who yesterday, of course, announced the decision to allow water supply into southern Gaza Strip under the demand of President Joe Biden. Well, today he writes that I supported the agreement with Biden about supplying water. I object to the opening of the siege and to entering aid into Gaza. Our commitment is to the families of the Israelis murdered and the hostages now in Gaza, and not to the killers of Hamas. Obviously, Israel wants to apply maximum pressure on these Hamas terrorists, and any such aid, we know very well, will go first to the hands of Hamas, to these murderers who slaughtered so many Israelis on Saturday.
Rafael, Egypt's President Fattah el-Sisi is saying that Israel's current campaign in Gaza goes beyond the right to self-defense, saying this also as nationals are starting to gather at the Rafah crossing, but Palestinian nationals of the Gaza Strip not being allowed to enter into Egypt.
Well, first of all, coming from Mr. Sisi, this kind of accusation makes me smile. When you're talking human rights and the respect of human lives, Mr. Sisi is a dictator. He got Egypt rid of the Muslim Brothers, the Muslim Brotherhood, which was also a tyrannical regime that didn't last long. But he himself is no great democrat. So coming from him, it's really just let us smile and ignore, and let's accuse him and the Egyptian government of crime against mankind, because during the past few days the Israelis have insisted on the fact that Egypt should open the Rafah crossing, and not only to let some foreign double nationality Palestinians go out, which, by the way, even though we saw quite a few people at the Rafah crossing, are many. There are tens of thousands of Palestinians, Gazas, who do have citizenship, whether it's European or American. The fact that you don't see a lot of people there is very simple. The Hamas is not letting them get there. The Hamas is blocking their way to the Rafah crossing. The Hamas has exploded a main highway used by the people to evacuate the north of Gaza towards the south, killing 70 people. The Hamas killed 70 Palestinians to block a highway and prevent them from reaching the Rafah crossing. This being said, of the Hamas, we have no doubt they have a record of crimes against mankind, but the Egyptians are very guilty for the simple reason that would they open, I mean, it's not like people are going to go into Cairo, right, in coffee shops and around the Nile. They are going in the Sinai Desert. It's a desert, and there you can open a ginormous refugee camp, the same same way it was done in Turkey for Syrian refugees, with all the international help being able to arrive freely. And I say it again, Egypt is guilty, but the international community is even more guilty because it doesn't put enough pressure on Egypt. It should parachute without asking Mr. Sisi's permission, already parachute tents, beds, food, and make it a fait accompli to receive these people. Now, on the Israeli part, we have to understand two things. A ceasefire, a humanitarian ceasefire, it doesn't exist. We do not need to cease fire. We know for sure that we will not hit areas where there are Palestinian innocent civilian people, refugees or not refugees, south, north, it doesn't matter. We will not hit them, but we have to be able to hit the terrorists even though there is a humanitarian operation going on. When I was with the IDF, we were in Rwanda, and there were the civil war between the Hutu and Tutsis in Rwanda. We had a new humanitarian operation going on. We were all with our weapons and we were ready to fight because at the same time there were terrorists there in Rwanda, and even people who were trying to take advantage of the humanitarian aid. You will see it in the Sinai and you see it in Gaza. Gangsters who will try to take this humanitarian, as you said, it might come to the table of the Hamas, this humanitarian aid, but it will also be attacked by people who want to steal it. So all this means we do not need to have a ceasefire. We can continue firing, but we will spare the innocent people.
Just a small comment. When we hear these statements from Sisi and other Arab leaders about caring so much about the Palestinians in Gaza, well, Europe has managed to take in millions of refugees out of Syria. Why isn't Egypt and other Arab countries taking any of the Gazans that they say they care so much about?